Where should we start?
Back in Bukuro.
Back in Bukuro.
So a lot of people visiting recently Tokyo. I think we mentioned this before.
Hmm.
There's a few other writers popping over. Trying to keep up with everyone. Kind of tricky.
Shout out Jeff. Nice to meet you. Good chatting.
Jeff, who
long time listener.
Yeah. And there's a few other people that are gonna be rocking up in the next few weeks. So
Writers as well, or
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there's some other. I won't mention their names if they're
for privacy
trying to keep their
concerns.
privacy,
Yeah.
but there are a few other, I think, writers that I'm aware of who are coming out. Everyone's welcome to hit me up if they're around Tokyo.
You know where to find us.
Yeah, so check the channel title.
It's too loud, maybe. Okay.
Equalize.
Oh, no, that's me. Test. Okay. Yeah. Should be all right.
Equalized.
Do you wanna talk about the election?
Election.
Don't really care.
Not really. I mean, nothing about it really like surprised me.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything too surprising.
I guess I'm more like surprised that people
Were surprised.
who were surprised. Yeah. I'm like, what? I mean, I haven't set foot in the United States since like 2007, I think. And like literally everything pretty much unfolded exactly as I thought it would. So I'm like, I'm seeing people raging and flipping out. I'm like, okay, but like what? Like this really came as a surprise. Like what?
Yeah.
I mean, I just really can't process that, I guess, at this point.
I think it's more of the same kind of echo chambery stuff, right? Where I was browsing Reddit, and yeah, I mean, a lot of the subreddits are very I don't like even want to say I don't want to say left leaning, but let's say Democrat leaning. And yeah, get banned if you don't really conform with a hive mind. So yeah, if you create that echo chamber for yourself and you think everyone's on the same page as you, then yeah, you'll be surprised.
I saw some, just on social media and stuff. I saw some really wild takes from, much. I mean, it's always a bit of a fun house where like what would count as like a well-known author, but I'll just say like writers or authors that have like a name, I guess, or at least somewhat well known, and just the level of like shock expressed by them, and I'm like, what? I mean, are you not like like how aware are you of like most of this country? Because if you're like at ground level, I mean, that's the only takeaway I could take is just people that are in weird echo chambers or something, or like, I mean, I have a hard, I mean, other than like complete, PMC kind of media types or something, I'm like, what even is a Democrat? Like anyone that's like sincerely, like a sincere Democrat.
Yeah.
Like I just can't even really, again, keep in mind, we're not, saying anything about the other side here. We're just saying like, what would even,
I mean, yeah,
what would that even, like, I just can't even like imagine that at this point. I'm like, what were you like?
Yeah.
It just seems like there's so many contradictions in that like, I just can't even really get my,
maybe just to level set, like at least for myself, I consider myself pretty apolitical when it comes to Western democracy, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like I'm, I don't pick sides sort of within that culture.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think we both have political / societal operational ideas, I guess, like of how society should operate. But that being said, in terms of how the political system has been working in the West, in Canada as well, right? I don't really identify with either sides in particular. Like it.
I think the people that are, I certainly don't identify with the people that are taking the outcome here as like some kind of crazy like victory or win.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like equally kind of nuts to me for various reasons.
Yeah.
But it,
I mean, like all things considered, the Western industrial pharmaceutical war machine will keep chugging along, basically, right?
Yeah,
like regardless of who's in charge.
Yeah,
that's kind of where I start. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the obvious. If you analyze like what budgets were,
I feel kind of like silly even saying this at this point. It's probably such like a lukewarm take nowadays, but.
Well, I don't think it is, because I've seen, again, I was quite shocked from both sides, where, I mean, the people that are literally, wailing and gnashing their teeth and,
right.
Crying in their sleeve. And also the people that are like out cheering and celebrating and having parades. I'm like, this is like, both of those takes seem equally like crazy to me, where I get that you can.
Well, it's like people riot when their team, when their like sports team
that's
loses.
Exactly what. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is like, if you're like,
it's like, are you really identifying this heavily with like your little tribal group, right? Like, I mean, zoom out and look at the big picture a bit, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the only response only thing I could compare it to would be sports or tribalism, or try to think what I was posting in some chat about this a few days ago, and try to see if I can log this thread up so I could maybe bring up, because I definitely was making that exact sports comparison, where it's like
I can vamp while you find it, but yeah. I mean, like, let's rewind to like 2007, 2008, like Obama's Hope and Change campaign. Like, yeah, man, it's intoxicating, right? Like, who doesn't want the hope and who doesn't want change for the better, right? But then you kind of watch it for a few years and you get a bit older and you're like, okay, well, the same thing seems to kind of continue regardless of what side wins. What
face you're putting on it.
So like, what's really going on here, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that was like, along with 9/11, like I think Obama was one of the kind of like milestone disillusioning agents.
Well, it should be,
where
right?
like, look how much money was spent into bombing other countries. I mean, I think more than any other presidency prior to that, almost. And
so I mean, we'll if nothing else, the next 4 years will be interesting, I think. But it's kind of in the same vein of, do you know that supposed like Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times? Yeah, kind of interesting in that way.
I think one of the interesting things that could happen. Okay, well,
you logged it up, right?
I've logged it up, so just briefly. But no, I was just briefly saying that, like, without teams, without masters, without identities, like, most people don't know who they are, and they can't really function or have goals. And I think like everyone pays service to like extreme individualism, but I think in practice, like, almost everyone basically like doesn't like it. Right.
Like,
I don't think because if you look at what's popular, I mean, sports are overwhelmingly popular. Partisan politics are overwhelmingly popular. Teams are overwhelmingly popular. So I think when people don't have these, recourses, then they don't know what to do. They don't know who they are. There's nothing to define themselves with.
Yeah, I mean, that group identity is very comforting, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I can still identify that part of myself that seeks comfort within a group identity.
Yeah.
But again, kind of going back to our discussion of being, what you call it, third culture children.
Yeah.
Like, it becomes harder and harder to identify with that fantasy.
Yeah. I think there are people, like, I have seen, I'm not going to name names and it's not even relevant, but I think there are people that come from almost like an immigrant background, but then they try to like become the over conformer.
Right.
So they're like, oh, I might not have, maybe I have like a Indian background or a, Latin American background, but I'm going to super identify with, this little faction of the mainstream, or I'm going to try to super fit in with that. And
yeah,
I never really got that either. I'm like, well, I mean, I understand it in theory, but
kind of in that vein, a lot of the like Chinese immigrants who were my peers, children of Chinese immigrants in Canada, their family would become like super Christian.
Yeah.
Which is funny because there's no like Christianity in China.
Yeah.
So they come here, they come to Canada and they seek community, and that becomes kind of a proxy for community, right?
Yeah, I can understand that too. I mean, I think there's that sense of someone was I think one of our friends was saying something like that, like his mother was from a immigrant background. She became a Jehovah's Witness or something.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there is that faction where I'm one of those weird assholes where like wherever I am, I just try to like force my environment to conform to me rather than the other way around. Like I don't know, I just declare my extreme individuality and then sort of expect quite insanely expect everything around me to just conform to it.
To maybe reframe that a bit, that's actually quite hard to do and takes quite a bit of conviction in order to be able to stand by your belief sort of in the face of an environment that doesn't necessarily welcome it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I aspire to that level of conviction in my own reality, right?
But I think I mean, I wouldn't say like always completely uphold that, but I think there is something to be said for like not trying to over conform or join a team or join a handy faction or something.
Yeah, I mean, we might have even talked about this before, but and from Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising, like the goal of any society is never to actually serve the individual or to help the individual self manifest, right? Society's requirements actually are always in opposition to the individual.
Yeah,
and suppress the individual basically.
I think the deeper you go into actual sort of like occultism or like esoteric themes, like this does come out where they're like, if you want to actually get anywhere, your number one enemy is your family or your coworkers or your I think a lot of people don't want to hear that because it's not the friendly community solidarity kind of message. But in practice, I think that sort of is the case where if you're worried about what everyone is going to think, then you're probably not going to get very far with it.
Yeah.
Or get anywhere with it.
Right.
But But I think I feel like in the U.S. It's almost like I feel like people are LARPing individuality while actually being very, partisan or kind of community identity based, whether that's sports teams or political teams or both, at the same time.
Or fashion. I mean,
fashion,
right?
Yeah. Horrible fashion.
Which I don't claim to have escaped, but I guess worth identifying it at the very least, and realizing that the reality you're standing in is more likely than not one that you actually defined as an individual. And you're probably living in someone else's reality. And at least being aware of that, I think maybe is the correct place to start.
I was getting into this where I guess I have a reputation for just like talking a lot of shit about, you know, the U.S. scene or the U.S. art scene or whatever, and you know,
just calling it how it is,
just
man.
calling it how it is. I mean, I appreciate that there are people that are trying to raise standards and do interesting things, but I still think there could be a bit more outside challenge, I guess, because I think all these scenes have a tendency to get very like incestuous and like not really examining themselves from too much of a how it seems from elsewhere, maybe, or how it seems from outside. So ideally, like I think there should be more like international cooperation or collaboration or something, but I don't think in practice I don't think it tends to really. I think it's still very like monocultural sort of flow of material or flow of things. Someone trying to remember who just won the Nobel prizes. They just announced them
for what?
For literature and for. I think it was
Nobel Prize.
Nobel literature. I'm totally blanking on who was someone boring. Okay, Hong Kong. Yeah, the Korean writer. So it still seems very mid. Okay, she's Korean, but still doesn't seem
like Korean or like American
Korean.
Okay.
I mean, I get that they're trying to highlight better than Bob Dylan or whatever, but who also
is he right?
Sadly won it. No, nah, he's just a musician.
Oh, okay.
So they're just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think there's steps in the right direction, but I think there are a lot of actual African writers or other area writers that could have been highlighted more. And I don't know how much the current translations are really bringing this stuff to people, or
I have no idea about any of this. Yeah. This is outside of my
the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Well, yeah, I mean, or the ongoings, the going-ons in international literature as a whole.
I think the Nobel Prize for it was a nice idea, but
is that like a recent addition?
Well, this was just this year.
Oh, for literature?
Yeah.
Okay, so before they didn't have anything for literature.
Well, no. They've had it for like 100 years. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it's had its ups and downs. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of writers that should have won it and didn't, and there's also some very puzzling choices where you're sort of like, really, but I mean, in theory, at least, they're highlighting underknown, writers from kind of around the world, around the globe that are ideally doing something interesting.
Well, yeah, that's on paper. On paper, that's what it is.
I think in theory,
practice,
in practice, it doesn't.
It might be the meme of Obama giving Obama a gold medal.
No, it's very similar. Well, he that was the Nobel Prize too.
He actually did. Oh, was that actually the Nobel?
He won the Nobel Peace Prize,
right?
For, I don't know, existing, I guess. Like I don't know what he. Not really sure what the rationale behind that was, but
did you hear about the untimely death of his pool boy in or was it his chef?
No,
you didn't hear about this at all.
Chef, yeah.
So it was Martha's Vineyard, like his estate there or whatever, summer house, and this happened, I think, this summer, was it, or earlier this year? But yeah, like his chef, his cook, was found drowned in like very shallow water in the pool.
Oh wow!
And he was like a strong swimmer. So the conspiracy theory is it was Obama's gay lover that he killed.
Okay.
No, I don't have anywhere to go with this, but it's just another one of these news stories that kind of quietly disappeared.
Like quietly vanished. Yeah.
Well, lots of that going on this year, actually. Little strange oddities in the news that kind of disappear.
Don't really go anywhere. Yeah.
I mean, well, look at the Trump assassination attempt, right? Like that very quietly disappeared pretty quickly, I think, and they like quietly cremated the body before any sort of toxicology was done on the shooter. I don't know too much. I don't have the firsthand details, but again, it like, you know,
I think like that actually had the funny thing with that is that like I think that like even if that had never happened, I still think things would have played out exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that had any actual impact on what would have like happened really. So I mean, yeah, this seems like a notable event, but I think the pieces were already in place where even if that had never happened,
the stuff around that event is so sketchy. It's like the head of the Secret Service refused to resign over it.
Okay, yeah.
Which like what? There was a successful,
semi-successful assassination.
Basically, I mean, through you know the skin on his teeth, somehow luck played out in such a way that, but by all means, that should have been a successful assassination. Right? So to be in charge of security and to not like really take responsibility for that.
Abe here, right? Where this is also.
But did people step down over that?
I'd have to look it up. They certainly should. I mean, that's such a like. I feel like the Abe thing was just such a insane embarrassment. Yeah, where it's like, what was security even? Like what? I mean, but
I mean, Japan, and they're not really used to
like actually having to do that or anything.
Like actual
really.
threats.
Actual threats, really.
Yeah.
Totally blindside. I mean, it's just like one of the That's another thing. I'm still concerned with that Abe assassination. I mean, I included that in my ACO text there. Which is the thing I wrote recently, but
ACO time surgery, I believe you called it. Where is it published?
It's coming out in this anthology magazine thing called Xenopoem.
Will it be available online?
It will be, by edited by Kenji Shiratori, who's a somewhat well-known experimental writer. In Japan. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say whether he writes in English or not. I mean, it's very, it's almost like generated text or something. You know, using like very, very experimental kind of stuff. But so he's editing that, so it'll be out in not too long. I think maybe another month or two. But yeah, I feel like that Abe assassination maybe should have gotten more attention than it did.
Kind of, I don't know. Did it not get attention? Yeah, I mean, I certainly heard some, you know, American musings and mockings over that. But I don't know, what do you mean by it should have gotten more attention?
I don't know. I mean, it just seems pretty. I mean, yeah, like it was covered, but in much the same way that the Trump attempts kind of just slipped out of the news.
But okay, so how do you think it should have been covered more? Like, or what implication do you see that went unaddressed?
Security for one thing,
but do you necessarily want more security?
Like, no, but I do think Japan is sort of living in a I don't know, maybe fantasy of not believing that things like that can happen, or even just other kind of crime.
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, Japan's living in a fantasy, I think. I mean, just the most, again, it's overplayed at this point, but the declining population is very real, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I mean, Japan kind of going about business as usual. Meanwhile, you know, their social structure and kind of infrastructure will be collapsing over the next few decades, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like, presumably quality of life might go down here, but no one's
taking it too seriously. Or
I mean, according to the government, according to their publications, they're like doing a lot for it or preparing for it, or like it seemed. But again, how does that trickle down to boots on the ground reality, where most people just seem to be playing out the same patterns over and over and aren't too concerned about it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think the sense in which the police here is, I never have too much good to say about the police here, even though I'm sure not all of it is individually their fault. But yeah, I still wonder, I'm like, what was that security for Abe like doing? Or kind of I guess a bit similar to the Trump situation.
Yeah,
scenario.
I mean, the theory with the Trump assassination though was that it's like an inside job, right?
Okay.
Because do you know anything about how it played out, or just kind of
like fairly just the basics? I mean,
basically, like people were saying like, "Hey, there's a guy on the roof for like a while ahead of the shooting."
Okay, yeah.
I think they they were aware, even like they had files on him ahead of time, and he showed up there. He had a rangefinder.
So what, you think they just like allowed it to play out or something?
That's the theory, at least. That it was, they're basically supposed to let it happen, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, how would they like know that he was doing that in advance? Like what, I mean, yeah. I think the simpler explanation is just the security sucked and they like weren't prepared. But
possibly. Yeah. I don't know one way or the other. If you start sort of listening to the conspiracy narratives, I guess you could call them. I mean, maybe they're the truth. I just don't know, and I don't really have the bandwidth to, nor do I care enough to actually go in and understand what actually happened. But yeah, I don't know. Lots of funky stuff about that.
I think the problem with
like his house was like professionally cleaned seemingly afterwards.
Okay.
Like there was no silverware at his place, right? Like essentially the place was scrubbed. Yeah, like I mentioned, the body was cremated before any toxicology. Like his dad was acting really strange after the fact. Like they caught him at a Costco parking lot, and he just seemed very unfazed by the fact that, and maybe he's in shock. Who knows? I haven't been in that position, so I can't really.
Like how would you like react? Right? I mean, like what would even be an appropriate?
I think he dropped a Forrest Gump quote. I think he said, "I have to go pee."
Yeah, I mean, what would even be an appropriate like reaction in that situation? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I think the problem with conspiracy theories is that like they like over attribute agency,
right?
I guess, and they also like underplay like human incompetence,
right?
So like assuming that like everything is like some engineered, highly competent outcome that was like planned in advance.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like humans just aren't that.
Yeah,
I mean, and the other thing is that it ignores how much human effort is like wasted on things that like aren't, that either like don't cohere or don't work or like don't get off the ground or like, well, like if you look at actual like declassified documents, like the CIA was like trying to like put acid in Castro's cigar, or like they're trying to do all these like crazy, Mickey Mouse tier things, which like didn't really amount to anything.
Yeah.
So like, were they doing things behind the scenes? Yeah, but did most of them work? Like, not really. So I think, are there like, covert ops and like weird things happening? Yeah, but like, how successful actually are any of them is the other thing, or like to what extent are they like? I mean, sure, we can see some things that like military coups or like invasion. There are operations which are successful, but like things which are very like ambiguous or like like I guess just like the general run of like conspiracy type stuff where it almost seems like it's attributing way too much forethought and agency to stuff that probably just came out in the moment or like was like some random snap decision or something. Or
riffing off that a bit and kind of trying to make the point here that this isn't necessarily a conspiracy, a fault of conspiracy thinking, conspiracy narratives by themselves, because you can actually see this play out in other areas as well, in non-conspiratorial areas. And the example I have in mind was this was probably like December 2019 or something, and Sam Harris had a guest on his podcast, and the guest kind of casually, they're talking about something else, and casually the idea of a pandemic is talked about. Again, December 2019, like before COVID, maybe even earlier. This was like way before COVID. Not way before, but in the months leading up to COVID, before it was even like a international news thing. But the guest on Sam Harris's podcast basically casually says, like, oh, if there is a global disease threat, then, thankfully the people at the, what's the organization? The
World
FDA?
Health? Oh, FDA? Yeah.
No, not FDA. What's the other one? The disease control one?
Center for Disease Control.
CDC?
I think it's CDC.
Like, thankfully the CDC would have all these like all these protocols in place to like respond accordingly. And then they just continue the conversation, right? But it was just the idea of like, there's protocols in place. There's people who are in, who are prepared to handle these sorts of, unusual events.
Circumstances. Yeah.
And of course, fast forward 3 months later, and apparently no one has any control over anything. Yeah. Every like preparation, failed, right? But so just the over attribution to agency as a whole.
Over attribution of agency. Well, like
you always want someone else to have the situation under control.
Well, right? That's almost like a direct, like Alan Moore said something very similar to that, where he's like, it's just like preoccupation with conspiracy theories is just the need to believe that someone is in control.
Right. Yeah.
So like, cause the alternative is just like, no one's at the wheel, no one's running the show. Yeah. It's just happening and it's just unfolding in real time. And, well, another quote would be, Mike Tyson, where he says like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right. So I think it's kind of a similar take on that, where like, it seems like it's easy to have, contingencies and plans until shit gets real, and then what's actually going to play out.
Yeah, and when you find yourself in that situation where the reality you thought was going to manifest did not. Yeah. And it's quite upsetting to wake up to that. Yeah. And to realize that your approximation of reality, it wasn't reality, right? It was a creation of your own mind, basically. And people get upset when that happens, right? Understandably. Understandably. It is very upsetting.
It is upsetting.
My heart goes out to everyone in such a position. I think we all find ourselves there, right?
Yeah. I was thinking about this with 9/11 the other day for some reason, and I was thinking like, in theory, like if everyone on those flights had just like immediately just like gone ape shit on the hijackers, like would they have reached the cap? Like probably not, right? And like so they probably wouldn't have gotten. Like if as soon as the hijackers had like stood up, like if like literally 10 people had just like full strength tackled them, like without concern for injury or anything.
You're reminding me of what's his name, Marky Mark. What's his actual name?
Did he say something like that?
Yeah. I mean, that was his whole thing. He was like, if I was on those planes, things would have gone very different. So I'm just picturing you and Marky Mark on the 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm just using it as an example of like, you know, hindsight is so easy. Like you can obviously, you can always like project backwards in that way, but I'm just using it as an example of like, probably like if you had, you know, had hindsight or something, then you probably could have gone Marky Mark and full Funky Bunch on the hijackers and fucking but like obviously in reality, like no one knows what the fuck is going down, what's happening, or like what are they trying to do or anything, right? So hindsight is always, you know, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So another example of that.
One sentiment I've heard echoed a few times lately is the idea of that, like living in post 9/11 New York was actually like the peak of like American existence,
like
basically.
solidarity or something.
That was actually like the best time
post 9/11.
In New York specifically, where everyone's in that you know, like we're all American and we're in this together and we're gonna get the bad guys, and like what
I think there's a case to be made for that. Like you probably could make that is
I mean, nationalism is again talking about group identities, right? Like that's so intoxicating.
As long as you ignore what the government was doing at the time,
right?
Because I mean, I think you could ignoring what the Cheney administration was getting up to at the time, but you could argue that at ground level there was more solidarity and kind of community.
My favorite aspect of that was Bush's address, his speech in the wake of 9/11, where he was basically like, you have to go out and shop. Like
did you say something like that?
That's how we defeat. It was
buy more Walmart or something.
Let me pull it up because it's quite funny actually, and it's let's see here, Vamp for a bit. Vamp is where you occupying
the air.
Yeah,
I was just considering like alternative responses to like 9/11 rather than the responses they actually had. And certainly one of them would have been to just like immediately rebuild the Twin Towers, like exactly the same. Like instead of invading, Iraq or something, like literally just rebuild it exactly as it had been, and just like make it even more of a business center or something, right?
That'll show them.
Yeah, I mean it's one tack they could have taken. I understand why they maybe didn't do that, but not being overly phased is another way to maybe handle that or react to that. Well, or like literally using any of those Iraq war funds to like improve the healthcare system or actually improve the country. Could have been one response, like actually just make it a better country rather than.
Well, that's hard work, you see. And there's not much money to be made off of Lockheed Martin stocks in doing so, right?
Yeah.
I can't find the exact quote right now. Wish we had a third set of hands to pull stuff up, but yeah, I mean, the gist of it was just that you have to, like, I know you're afraid, but like if we don't go out and shop and if we don't like go about our lives, then the terrorists win, right? So basically go out
more
and consume.
Consumerism. More consumerism.
The backbone of American culture. Well, I shouldn't say that, not necessarily just American.
Sort of is in a way.
I mean, Japan's quite consumerist, right?
Yeah, certainly.
But is that American?
Well, yeah. I mean, it sort of is.
They imported that culture into Asia.
They're still running, like, before the war, I mean, they're still kind of running feudalism in a way. I mean, we weren't really, like, until the post-war period, like they didn't really have like crazy amounts of consumer goods or like, industries in that sense. So, yeah, they're still kind of running a quasi feudal system, I guess. Not sure it was entirely better, either, but definitely wasn't the same kind of society.
Right.
Which, again, doesn't seem to have. I mean, it was kind of a spectacular rise for a while, but it's really only like 30 years or something. I mean, the bubble crashed in like the late 80s, so it's only really like since the end of World War II. I mean, it's occupation recovery starting about kind of 1950 or so. So it's only really 30 years. I mean, they had kind of a full economic upward ascension, I guess. I don't know what to call it, but
economic boom, I guess. That's the word.
Economic boom, right? Yeah. So it's 30 years. Yeah, I mean it's a period of time, but in the grand scheme of things, is it that long? I mean, not really.
How long are we since the bubble burst? I guess so.
Like literally the
30
same
years.
Yeah. So the same
the
same amount of time basically. So I think people now are like, what? I mean, like if you talk to people that live through that, they're like, yeah, it has like literally nothing to do with what the economy is like now, or what it has been like for most of the. I think the 90s for Japan was just like this slow come down.
Yeah, hangover.
I want to almost call it like a ecstasy come down or something, where it's like not too, like a gentle, not one of those like real gritty come, just like where it's like a fade out come down. So I think like in the 90s, like it still wasn't really, it still hadn't really hit that like the bubble was burst. And I think you kind of see that in the culture, because it's still like more, I feel like the 90s Japanese culture was way more.
Well, I guess you still had the people who like profited off the bubble, who like were economically prosperous.
And so there was sort of, it was more cosmopolitan, I guess. Like it was more outward looking, or like engaging with other countries or cultures. And whereas I think like, I think since 2000 or so, it's, the past 20 or so years, I would say like the reality is starting to gradually sink in a little bit more, for better or worse.
I mean, so in your Eiko time surgery piece, you kind of, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm thinking about fashion specifically here in Japan, but it's gotten like quite black and drab and kind of Korean influence primarily, I suppose, but very monolithic and kind of boring, basically.
Yeah.
And I think you contrast that with what like early 2000s or 90s gal fashion, where it's pretty like...
That was one, I mean, gal was one facet of it, but it was more like an entire...
like fashion subcultures, and everyone's doing their thing, and they're kind of like passionate about it.
And I think the real sort of representative of that was like that Fruits magazine, which is like a Harajuku, street photography magazine. And in a single issue you would see, gal, Lolita, visual K, like you would just see like, like 10 or 15 completely different looks, and also some ones that were just like completely off the map, to where you're like, what, like someone's doing this, but like I have no idea what this could even, where could this even be coming from? So when that magazine folded, like the photographer, can't remember his name, I think Aoki something, but I mean, that's what he said. He was like, there's no one is cool anymore, so I can't continue this. Like no one, like literally no one is doing anything interesting anymore. So like I don't even have, I have no content.
Yeah,
that
there's no one to feature.
I couldn't even like. I can't even really like feature anyone to the point where it would have the same meaning.
Yeah.
So we kind of stopped doing that, and I think that's one kind of good barometer. And I'm trying to remember when that was. I mean, it was probably like 15 years ago or something. But even at that time, I mean, I think you could sort of see where it was heading.
Yeah.
Like where the trends were heading and where it was kind of downgrading or heading in a more homogenous direction. And shortly afterwards was when the real fast fashion came in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Zara, Forever 21, H&M, American Apparel, Uniqlo, yeah. Which that's why, I mean, for those who aren't familiar, we're just talking about this piece I've written, which does have kind of like essay components, and one of them is just devoting a lot of time to Uniqlo, which is like this. I think is like I see completely as within that downward trend, and I would basically consider just like a disaster in every sense. But I think that it couldn't have. Well, I mean, it was started like fairly back in the day, you know, more than 30, 40 years ago. But I noticed that it didn't really take off until that period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like is everything else became less interesting. Like Uniqlo's stock started coming up, right? And I don't think that's an accident, because I do think it's such a destructive and boring brand, which is just like cliche in every sense. I mean, there's nothing, and certainly is fast fashion, no matter how much they. Well, I mean, they make these very like politician style, like, we're not fast fashion, you know, we're not this, and it's like, well, yeah, like cigarettes don't cause cancer, and you know, like politicians don't lie. Richard Nixon's not a crook. Bill Clinton has never had sex or inhaled marijuana, right? Yeah. So, like, come on,
or gone to Epstein's Island.
Yeah, right. So I'm just like, come on, Uniqlo, like, you're using sweatshop labor, you're, you know, creating junk garments which are very average to wear and are just like ugly. Like, I don't know what else to say. I mean, if you're like if your idea of like a hip t-shirt is like put the Rolling Stones logo on like a fast fashion, like, okay, anyone with like a, you know,
anyone with a slave shop at their disposal
can just crank that. Yeah. Or like anyone can just, with a cheap, you know, printer, could put that together. So they're using the most cliched imagery, like just the shittiest production labor processes, and somehow making it seem like this is a cool thing to buy. Like, I'm just like, what? Okay, yeah. But I see very few people other than myself. I mean, I guess I take it to kind of a comical extreme, but I think there is an element of like that crossover where interesting things decline and very uninteresting things suddenly shoot up into a level that they, you know, previously hadn't had. I don't think there's necessarily a coincidence there. So I think there's at least a very strong correlation, if not whatever else you could make of that.
Well, I'm trying to think what other, like, we've been talking about sort of cultural decline throughout this same period of time, right? You know, earlier today I was kind of chuckling to myself, like trying to like map, like, remember rap albums used to have like skits in them, right? Yeah. So when did that stop being pervasive, and map that to like cultural decline and economic conditions worsening?
Well, they used to have hidden tracks too, which is another thing. Well, I think that's just like the format. I mean, like,
I'm half joking, but like, it was, you know, like a silly thing that was there. Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, it's also like, you know, the college dropout is what, like 2006, 7, 8, and that has skits. So anyway, kind of throwaway comment, but yeah, I mean, just trying to like maybe tie a bow on this in the last 10 minutes or so. because we're talking about this cultural decline, economic decline from a few different facets, right? But yeah, I mean, like, it's weirdly all tied together with I don't know, less prosperous global sentiment, I guess. Like, you can call it the American dream being dead, but yeah, I mean, we're seeing it in Japan as well, where there is no American dream per se, right?
Yeah. Even though there are people in Osaka, I think, doing Trump parades with paper mache statues, and
there's a lot of Trump stuff here. Funnily enough, it always cracks me up when I see we'll be in Harajuku and Trump parade.
Trump parades are coming around the corner.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too is just like retired people literally have like nothing to do. So they're like, what? I mean, there's people that just have no outlet, too much free time. Maybe their family's ignoring them, or their kids don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
So they're like, I could join a paper mache parade about
it's something to do.
A foreign politician. Yeah. I guess. I mean, if it's something to.
But again, like, why is that the most, like, okay, group identity is comforting.
Yeah.
But like, let's do something more interesting, I guess, right? Like, let's create a group identity that is based around a more interesting activity than random celebrity worship, basically, one way or the other, right? I mean, if you're what was the thing, Will Ferrell? There's a terrible clip. Everyone look it up, please. It's
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell in this short YouTube snippet. Loud white men for Kamala Harris.
Okay, yeah. Sounds like something that would actually exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's
or a porn of some kind, but yeah.
That conjures a very different image, but I mean, they published it, I think, like in the days leading up to the election, and I saw it after the election, and a lot of the YouTube comments were like, okay, now this is funny.
No,
like, it wasn't funny.
It wasn't funny before,
but like now, when you look at it in this light, it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean,
rap albums used to be like just like this weird buffet where like half of it was just like some stupid skits, and then you'd have like little sound clips, and like some of those albums from the 90s are just like, they're just wild. I mean, it's like they're assuming you have like crazy time to just sit down and like listen to Method Man role playing as like a pharmacist. Yeah, I don't know, just weird things. I'm trying to think of a good example, but they definitely went ham with those like skits and little interludes and other little things they're just fucking around with.
Did the 2008 collapse kill that? I'm trying to think.
I think it was just Napster CD end.
Okay, maybe
because
no one bought CDs anymore, right?
Well, yeah, because
you wouldn't
if you got a 56K internet,
right?
You're not gonna sit there trying to download some
Slim Shady.
You're not gonna. You're just like, I want the single, I want this.
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna get the best tracks and then create a mix or something. Like, so everyone was just
hopefully not get any viruses along the way.
Not get So I think once people had the freedom to like pick and choose like tracks, then it sort of became apparent that like no one is gonna sit there and listen to like 73 straight minutes of whatever, unless it's like really good, maybe, or like unless you've like kind of front loaded it, or like if you're even gonna make an album, then you probably have to sort of put a bit more, clean it up a little bit, maybe, or Look at those music things from the 70s, man. There's like triple albums, there's like 20-minute songs, because like it's the 1970s, like all you have is a record player and low quality weed, and I guess like a TV, which probably doesn't even play things 24/7. So you can sit around listening to like 3 hours of music and getting high and like just sitting on your bed. And it probably seems like a productive use of time. If you do that in like, I don't know, 2006, like what your friends calling you and like, you know, the internet is popping up, like there's a million things happening, right? So you can't really, you're not gonna have that same experience, I guess, maybe if unless you really tried to, or like tried to
kind of should though, I guess, right? Like, I mean, the fragmentation of attention is that good? Is there any, like, I'm trying to think, is there any way it's been good?
Music quality, in the sense of like everything has sort of gotten shittier. Like in some ways, like CDs were like sort of worse quality than LPs, and like MP3s certainly were not like much of an improvement. So yeah, I mean, like even sometimes if you go to like a bar with like a good record player, and they're like I noticed this even in Bukuro sometimes, where like I would like go to a, you know, record bar where they would like have like a good turntable and speakers and stuff, and like they would be playing albums that I was like completely familiar with, but I'd be like, oh wow, this is hitting like way different, or like, oh, this is like I can like it's just different, like just
and
the quality.
Do you attribute that just to the acoustic?
Yeah, just I think there is it's a bit of a cliche, but like I think like just the turntable effect and like the actual speaker effect and the quality, and you know, venue has something to do with it too, but versus like listening to like, you know, a iPod or something, or like, so I mean, it's just you're just definitely not getting the same effect, I guess. So I think that has something to do with it, too. Decline maybe, or, I don't know, people maybe not taking music as seriously.
Yeah, I have a few friends who got into like DJing, I guess in the last few years. I don't know. I mean, my one friend is like way into it, and like my sister was casually like asking me some questions about it, and I referred her to him, and he just, I mean, you know, he's dropping all these like different turntable models that are like good entry level things, and I'm just completely out of that. But I do see him posting like physical records, specifically like, I guess, kind of techno stuff. So I guess this is probably not too different from your small batch book prints.
Yeah, it's sort of like, similar.
There are shops that still kind of keep the tradition alive, and people who care enough.
There's still places that sell them. I mean, even
just not abundant, I suppose.
Even things, but there's definitely a scene of people that, you know, are kind of keeping that around.
We're probably just well, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, let's wrap it up just in the last few minutes here.
I think we're gonna go into a double. Due to timing constraints, we're gonna have a double album episode here. Or,
I'm out of the country next week, so basically.
We're gonna pre-record.
I need to pre-record a bit.
Pre-record the next one too, so this will be like a double album.
We'll probably talk about something else. You think?
We might just take another completely different track.
Let's see how it goes.
Improvise.
Yeah.
I think we avoided saying anything too controversial about the election.
I mean, I don't want to particularly go out on record on one side or the other. Let me clarify that. I want to be on the record as not being on either side of it.
I would agree. I would agree completely. And, you know, like if people are really, for whatever reason, if there's anyone that's like legitimately having a hard time because of the results, then like, I think like we feel that too. And like, I mean, if you're at ground level and, you know, something's getting affected that specifically affects you. I mean, it could be like disability payments, could be reproductive, you know, access of various kinds, Planned Parenthood. I mean, anything, like, we're not trying to like, you know, minimize that, obviously, and remains to be seen what will happen. But so it's just our take, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I hope that change leads to improvement. That's the only thing I can really hope for, I guess, right? Like, again, we've been talking about this kind of slow and steady cultural economic decline, and like, I don't know, any direction is better than the current direction. I don't know how to articulate it properly, but I don't know, like, if if you're having a hard time with the election, like put that energy into something productive, I suppose, right? Like use it as a catalyst.
That's usually what it comes down to. And even if we're just going a bit over time here, like I do have this one dude that comments on some of my posts, and they're quite critical of publishing and other things, and he gave like quite a, I want to say like I don't know, maybe he was sincere, maybe he was genuine, but he was just like, "Oh, are you okay?" or something. And I think my post was actually quite humorous, and I did try to reply to him in, I think, quite good faith, where I was just like nothing I post is supposed to be just like everything sucks, we're fucked. Like I'm never like trying to just say that, which I think is kind of a ridiculous take, but I do think people should, look at things critically and kind of see where they can challenge to maybe do better or think better.
Right.
Is my take, I guess.
Yeah, I lacked a bit of context on your post and on the initial response. I don't know. Do you want to clarify that at all?
It's not worth it. Yeah, okay. Probably just move on. But
so DBLV on Instagram.
JustinIsis93 on Instagram, and JustinIsis1 on Twitter or X or whatever. Yeah.
And thanks for listening. Have a good week.